Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Sir Vince Cable has a reputation as a somewhat pessimistic, if often accurate, economic guru, but he's now almost certain to be the new Lib Dem leader. Now, I don't want to be rude, Sir Vince, but it doesn't seem as if anybody else actually wants the job.
Well, it sees. I mean, there's no competition at the moment, but, you know, I'm happy to take the job if that's what comes along.
So, Gordon Brown, coronation. Theresa May, coronation. Sir Vince Cable. Is there a bit of a lesson of history here?
Well, I think the last Lib Dem who got in on a coronation was Joe Grimmond, actually. He was a great role model, in fact. But I don't think that's terribly relevant. I mean, I think, you know, I'm actually very optimistic about what I and a very good team of colleagues can achieve. I mean, I think on the big issues of the day, like Brexit, we're in exactly the right position, with long-standing principled position that will become increasingly in line with the mood of the country and as the economy deteriorates. So I'm very optimistic about what we can do. I
suppose the serious point is that with a leadership contest, a party has a chance to really look itself in the mirror and have some really take some hard decisions and take a clear change of direction. And for instance, are you going to have your own leadership manifesto? Are we going to see the Vince Cable manifesto before you become leader?
Yes, you will. And indeed, I'm working on it at the moment. We have a process in the party, comes to a conclusion in about 12 days' time. And indeed, I will have a manifesto, and it will set out what I and my colleagues will be able to achieve.
Are you in any respect going to lead the Liberal Democrats in a different direction to Tim Farron?
No, Tim did a very good job, you know, built up our membership, created lots of enthusiasm, but the situation's moved on, and I think in two fundamentally different ways from where we were 2 years ago. The first is that, of course, the whole Brexit debate now dominates the national agenda, and I will have to approach that consistently with where we were before, but in a different parliament. And I think the other thing which is different from a couple of years ago is that the two major parties we're competing with in a very, very fragile state. I mean, the divisions in the Tory party are palpable and open. Well, the Labour Party is already talking about expelling, you know, 50 of its MPs for ideological deviation. I mean, this is a very different world from the one Tim inherited.
That was just a Facebook page, really, wasn't it? And presumably they'd be welcome in the Liberal Democrats if they were expelled, but there's no real suggestion of that.
Well, we have a generous policy to refugees, and if they come, they will get food and accommodation. But no, I don't know what will happen. But I think it's a symptom of very, very deep division on what a fundamental point, because, you know, Jeremy Corbyn had a good election for sure. But there is an element of a bubble about it. I mean, he managed to attract large numbers of people on the basis that he was leading opposition to Brexit. Actually, he was very pro-Brexit and hard Brexit. And I think when that becomes apparent, the divisions in the Labour Party will become more real, and the opportunity for us to move into that space will be substantial.
On Brexit, do you want Britain to fail economically?
I do not want it to fail economically. I don't think the public voted to have cuts in their standard of living. And I think that's why there are two objectives, I think, in the Brexit.
I mean, the reason I ask that, if I may interject, is that you have said you have to hang on while the economy deteriorates before the public mood changes, and that's your moment, which makes it sound as if you're going to be kind of an economic Eeyore, as it were, observing disaster happening and just waiting for your moment.
No, I think it's not waiting for the moment. There is an imminent issue, which is whether the government continues to pursue the so-called hard Brexit, leaving the customs union and the single market. And we've got to work with other people. We did last week. There was a motion in Parliament led by some Labour MPs we supported to try and head off that disastrous outcome. But it may well be that with the situation deteriorating in the economies, I think it will, I mean, none of us are certain, but I think it will, people will realise, well, we didn't vote to be poorer, and I think the whole question of continued membership will once again arise.
Let me ask you about this, Parliament, because in the end, around 100 MPs, or a sixth of the MPs, voted for that motion, which suggests the single market issue is now dead for this Parliament. But you've talked about making alliances and talking across parties. Do you begin to see an alliance sufficiently deep into the Labour family and deep into the Tory family as well of pro-EU politicians, which is big enough to frustrate Theresa May's ideas on Brexit?
Yes, I think a lot of people are keeping their heads down. We'll see what happens in the autumn when people come back. I'm beginning to think that Brexit may never happen. I think the problems are so enormous. The problems are so enormous. The divisions within the two major parties are so enormous. I can see a scenario in which this doesn't happen. And certainly, it's our policy of having a second referendum, which didn't really cut through in the general election, is designed to give a way out when it becomes clear that the Brexit is potentially disastrous.
Now, all of a sudden, there's a new question buzzing around Westminster. Does Brexit really mean Brexit? Backbench Conservative rebels are said to be plotting to scupper the PM's plan. We're even told David Cameron has been calling his former colleagues to make the case for single market membership. And now business is wading in too. And I'm pleased to say we are joined in the studio by Paul Drexler, who is the president of the CBI, the biggest business group in the UK. Hello, thanks for being with us.
Good morning.
This morning. So after a while of saying relatively quiet, the CBI's definitely waded into the Brexit debate this week. Just spell out to us exactly what it is that you're calling for.
Well, I think the whole situation now has got to be very serious. So what we have done is laid out what I believe is a very common sense set of proposals. We have already decided to leave March 29th, 2019. That date is firmly in the ground. What the CBI team have done is develop a set of proposals about how we leave, and how we leave in a way that creates the best possible economic conditions in terms of jobs, in terms of economic growth, and importantly for the future of the next generation.
And what is that? To sum it up quickly.
So in essence what it says is we continue to operate to the principles and rules that we apply today in terms of the single market, in terms of the customs union, until such time as we have a very clear plan of what the future arrangement looks like.
Because some people would look at that and say, it looks like you're just trying to cling to the status quo for as long as possible. You're bad losers.
Well, as soon as anybody defines a plan for exit, sets out what it means, then we can transition. But in the meantime, we don't have a plan. Businesses around the country need to make decisions on investment, on whether to put their headquarters in the UK or somewhere else, on whether to place jobs in the UK or somewhere else. Those decisions are being taken now. So it's not about buying time. As soon as somebody has the plan, then of course we can know what the future holds. At the moment we don't. We're no wiser today than we were 12 months ago in terms of what conditions business will be able to plan on for the future.
There's been a bit of scepticism around the CBI's proposals. When I said that I was interviewing you on Twitter, some people said, oh, it's just business. They're just keen to keep their cheap labour coming to the UK. One of our paper reviewers described you as the arm of Brussels in the UK. How do you combat that scepticism? And is any of it justified?
Well, I think the time has come to have a serious, fact-based discussion about what the future looks like. I think the UK has potentially the best next 20 years in front of it that it's had for decades. Opportunities from technology, from artificial intelligence. And the only thing I believe the CBI wants to do is to create the best possible conditions for business in this country to grow and create the jobs of the future. And that is an opportunity, and we need to focus on the impact of technology, the impact of a changing world, the impact of education and skills needs. There's a very big agenda to cover in this country just to be able to compete globally. That's where the attention should be going. And in the meantime, we need as stable a set of conditions as we can until we define what that future looks like.
One of the big opportunities for growth, of course, would be a trade deal with the US, something that Donald Trump has said that he wants to get signed off as quickly as possible. If you have a long transitional deal where the UK stays in the customs union or stays in the single market, then that's not going to be on the table, is it?
Well, I think you have to look at it this way. The UK is already the largest foreign direct investor in the USA at about $449 billion. The USA is already the largest investor in the UK. We have had business relationships with the USA for a long time.
Wouldn't it be nice to have a trade deal with the US? Is it something you'd welcome?
I think, of course, we would welcome, but I think one has to sort of recognise not every trade deal is necessarily a good and fair deal for both parties. The USA has one of the best negotiating teams in the world in terms of trade deals. We don't want to walk into a bear hug, and I would be wary of trying to be too fast on a trade deal. The important thing is to know what we want to achieve, what the objectives are and what the trade-offs are. A trade deal is a dog-eat-dog activity. It's not a diplomatic activity.
Does it worry you then that the government in the UK might be so keen to sign trade deals quickly, get those positive headlines, that it walks into that bear trap?
I think what worries me is that we're not honest with people about all of these big issues. So we're going for headlines rather than the facts and evidence. All I think we have to be clear about in the future, this is the most important time for honesty and integrity. Give people the facts, give them the business case, let them understand what these generalized promises are. And a wonderful headline from the President of the USA or the Prime Minister of Japan is a wonderful headline, but the substance that matters is what are the jobs and opportunities for the next generation, and what level of debt will this country leave them.
And do you think then that politicians in this country are honestly giving people the facts?
I think we have not had an honest conversation about all the key issues that people are concerned about immigration, about some of the challenges that we face in competing on a global basis, about the great opportunities that are around for new technology and new jobs. I mean, there's a wonderful future in front of us, but we have to recognise there are also threats and challenges to that. And I would just encourage everyone, let's ease up on the vitriol and let's focus on the facts and evidence. Let's engage people in understanding the exciting possibilities, not feed them just bits and pieces that are on the surface exciting but lack no substance beneath. And what the CBI did last week, I commend the team for, which was a well thought out, common sense approach, not about whether we leave the EU, but how we leave it. And we have been focused on making a success of this for the past 12 months. And I think the contribution last week can move the debate ahead very significantly if people want to move to that phase.
Some people have, a quick thought from you, some people have portrayed Theresa May as not being friendly enough towards business. Do you think that's right?
Well, I think we have been through a period over the past 12 months where across the political spectrum there was perhaps less interest in the world of business. But I think 80% of all jobs in the UK come from business. We care about the future of this country. It's also our children who will be living in this country in the future. So I think what we would say is businesses right across the UK are willing, enthusiastic and have the experience to contribute to the solutions.
Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
So Donald Trump says a trade deal with the UK could be done very quickly. Theresa May says that other world leaders, including those of China, Japan and India, are also keen to do a deal with a post-Brexit Britain. President and Prime Minister were speaking at the G20 summit of the world's major economies in Hamburg yesterday. But could this transitional deal that some want, that would keep the UK in the EU single market and the custom union for several years even after exit, or could all that put paid to those plans? Here's what the man likely to be the next Lib Dem leader, Vince Cable, told the Marr Show.
I'm beginning to think that Brexit may never happen. I think the problems are so enormous. The problems are so enormous. The divisions within the two major parties are so enormous. I can see a scenario in which this doesn't happen.
We're joined now from Shropshire by the former Conservative Cabinet Minister and leading Brexit campaigner, Owen Paterson. Mr. Paterson, good morning to you. Vince Cable says that he now thinks Brexit may now not happen. What do you say to that?
Wow, what's new? Vince Cable always wanted to stay in the European Union. He's chucking buckets of water around. The fact is we had a huge vote this time last year. 70.4 million voters voted to leave. We had an enormous vote in the House of Commons, 494 votes to trigger Article 50. We had an election campaign in which the two main parties, Conservative and Labour, took 85% of the votes, and they made it very clear they backed the Lancaster House speech and leaving the customs union and leaving the single market and leaving the ECJ, and Vince Cable's party went down in votes, and as did the other little parties that want to stay in the European Union. So I'm afraid Vince is behind history. We are going to leave. We are on target. Michael Gove triggered leaving the 1964 London Convention so we can take back control of our seas and bring back a sane fishing policy, allowing prosperity to our fishing communities and, much more important, also getting environmental gains in our marine environment. So,
all right. You know, clearly you think we're still heading for the exit, but Mrs May called the election because she wanted a mandate for her version of Brexit. She didn't get it. Surely you can't just continue with business as usual?
Well, we've been over and over the election. We did not get the number of seats we wanted, but on votes, we got 13.7 million. That was more, many more actually, than the Great Blair landslide.
You didn't. You had an overall majority and you lost it. That's the fact.
I said that, Andrew. We know that.
So Andrew, you didn't get the mandate.
I'm not denying that. We did not get the...
You didn't get the mandate.
Oh, hang on, we got the votes. We got all the votes, and so did the Labour Party.
You know, Owen Paterson, we're in a parliamentary system where what matters is the number of seats you get in the Commons. You know enough about the British Constitution to know that's what determines the mandate, not the number of votes. We're not a presidential system.
I'm fully aware of that, Andrew, but you cannot deny that 85% of the electorate voted for parties that wanted to leave. And if you take votes in the Commons last week on the Queen's speech, not a single Conservative Member of Parliament abstained or voted against, and the Labour Party unwisely, Chukramuna, triggered an amendment wanting us to stay in the customs union, the single market, and got hammered. We got 322 votes against 101. So
all right.
I'm absolutely clear that we have to deliver this. I mean, much the most important point in all this is if we do not deliver a proper Brexit, which means leaving the single market, leaving the customs union and leaving the jurisdiction of the ECJ and taking back control, as we made very clear in the referendum, there will be absolutely appalling damage to the integrity of the whole establishment. Not just political, the media and the judicial establishment.
Well, some would say that that damage has already been done in other areas, but let's look at a little bit of the detail here. Now, under Article 50, Britain leaves the EU in about 20 months now. It's only 20 months, which means the deal will have to be done in 15 or 16 months to allow for people to approve it in the various parliaments and so on. Progress has been glacial. We've only really just begun. Why should there not be a transitional deal that keeps some of the current arrangements in place to mitigate this falling off a cliff?
Well, as Liam said in the Commons,
Liam who?
This should be one of the Liam Fox, this should be one of the easiest ever deals to conclude, because already we have zero tariffs, already we have complete conformity on standards, and already those who are negotiating with us have an enormous surplus with us, which they would want to keep going. The Germans sold an enormous number of cars last year. It's increasing each year. So that is the basis on which we're going. If you look at NAFTA, which was a more complex deal between independent states.
We haven't even started talking about free trade yet.
Yeah,
that's not even on the agenda yet.
Hang on, let me finish the question. If you look at NAFTA, which was a more complex deal between independent sovereign states, that took 14 months. And we are starting on a basis of mutual recognition of all our standards and zero tariffs. So, yes, there will be an implementation period, but it is very, very important politically that this is concluded fast. And there's a huge economic imperative as well, because it's uncertainty about this that will damage future investment and jobs. And the quicker we get on with it, and we know where we're going, and we can reach out to the world, we can take advantage of the fact stated on the European Commission website that 95% of the world's growth is going to come from outside the European Union, which is what we're seeing. We've seen our sales into the European Union go from 61% down to 43% today, and it's tumbling to 35%. We cannot take advantage of these wonderful opportunities in the wider world, which is growing much faster than the European Union.
Why not? Germany
unless we
does.
have the freedom to do so.
Why not? Germany does.
Because they can't conclude free trade deals.
Germany runs a balance of payments surplus, 9% of its GDP. It finds it perfectly possible to trade with the rest of the EU and with the rest of the world. It's got a bigger surplus than China. Why can't, if Germany can do both, why can't we?
They can't conclude deals. And we saw President Trump wants to do a deal with us.
They're the biggest exporters in the world,
sitting down
Mr.
with
Patterson.
a string of... And you saw Theresa May sitting down with the economies of the future. India, China, South Korea, these are all longing to do more business with us. And we can only do that once we are out of the customs union. And that is absolutely vital for the future of this country. That's where the future growth is.
The business in this country says we should stay in the single market and the customs union at least through a transition period. Does that count for nothing? Is the Tory party now so anti-business that it just ignores the wealth creators?
Well, I think what you're saying is that the CBI, which represents very large organisations, has made that statement. But talking to business widely and smaller private business, which of course dominates the economy, what is vital on this is to have a rapid implementation period. That is what's important. And there has to be clarity of where we're going. If we're in some permanent limbo of half in and half out, which will take also an enormous amount of negotiation and will also take ratification by the 27 countries and the European Parliament, as well as our own Parliament, that will drag things out. What we need to do is a clean, clear statement of reciprocal free trade, which should be really pretty easy to negotiate, because you already have that. We have zero tariffs, we have conformity of standards, we then have an implementation period. And that really needs to be done rapidly. Latest by the next election.
OK, we shall see how simple it turns out to be. Owen Paterson, thanks for joining us here. Tom, what do you make of this increasing talk of a transition period now, in which it's not clear, would we remain full members of the single market? Would we remain full members of the customs union? In which case, we cannot conclude very quickly, in Mr. Trump's word, a free trade deal.
Well, this is exactly where the battle is now heading between Brexiteers, leavers, relievers, and a lot of it. And of course, this will be really the only thing I think we could be able to fundamentally achieve in the next sort of years of negotiation. What has changed substantially since the general election, which you were touching on there with Owen Paterson, is of course Brussels and the EU27 are no longer negotiating with Theresa May and her 100-seat majority. They're negotiating with the House of Commons and the majority for a softer Brexit. So this will begin. The transition deal will define the rest of the deal, the rest of the final relationship. So getting the transition on the right trajectory is absolutely crucial, hence why you have Philip Hammond now making a major play to try and keep one foot in the EU, if not necessarily in the custody in the single market, and everyone else like Owen Paterson saying, get out. So these are the opening skirmishes on what will certainly be the nettle, which will eventually be grasped round about, sometime between October and spring next year. And
are you worried that the election result, the fact that she didn't get this mandate that she had looked for, indeed she's ended up in a weaker position than she was before the election, is going to make Brexit more difficult, it's going to muddy the waters, it means that her idea of Brexit is not necessarily the one that will become Brexit?
Yeah, I'm worried about that as a Brexiteer, but the reality is whatever the outcome of the election, or whether there'd not been an election, the same Remainiacs would have still been trying to scupper the will of the British people as expressed in June 2016.
If she'd had a 100-seat majority,
that wouldn't stop them at all.
No, but they wouldn't have succeeded. Now they might succeed.
Well, you say they wouldn't have succeeded. This is relevant. I don't think any of them are going to succeed. I think we just have to stop this nonsense, and the media included, this nonsense, this talk of soft Brexit and these transition periods. We can have a transition period once we're out, when we are just leading to the next process. But we have got to be out of the single market, out of the customs union, and not under the European Court of Justice.
All within the 2-year,
that happens automatically at the end of March 2019. Then we can agree that for a 2-3 year max 3-year period, we will have a position, as we move to the new deal. But I don't think there are many Leave voters, and indeed many Remain voters who accept. Most Remain voters do accept that result, unlike the people who like the CBI, who are fighting against it still. That they will accept anything more than that. Okay. I think we are. I think Owen Paterson's quite right. I think we are in a situation where we will be facing some really serious distrust in the, as I say, the establishment, the political world, the media, and everyone else, if we do not actually obey the will of the people.
What do you make of the reports in the Sunday papers? Though these days the Sunday papers seem to report something that's forgotten within a week. I mean, it was only 10 days ago or 2 weeks ago, Mr. Hammond was going to be the caretaker leader. Well, that's a story that didn't seem to last 48 hours. Yeah. But what do you make of these that Remain MPs on both sides of the House, plus peers, are going to try to derail this repeal act that the government needs to push EU law onto the UK statute book?
Yeah, I think they will use it to, at certain key points, attempt to defeat the government. Not over the whole thing, but they'll put down amendments. I mean, this summer reminds me so much of the summer of '92 with the Maastricht Treaty coming into a fragile John Major government. And people then were plotting in the opposite direction, actually, Eurosceptics, to try and stop that.
An election.
He had won with a huge percentage of the vote, tiny majority. majority. 23, bigger than she would have died
but
for
again,
that.
a shock victory.
Yeah, but it kind of, but you know what I mean? The summer was full of talk and planning and plotting, some of which came to fruition in the parliamentary sessions that followed. And I think some will come into fruition from this autumn onwards, where you will see alliances across the Commons and in the Lords. And there are going to be some moments of high parliamentary drama, I think.
Sounds like a long, hot autumn.
A long,
Never
hot
mind
autumn.
summer.
A long, hot autumn. And winter.
And winter too.
Yeah.
Spring after that.
It's global. I thought it was all global warming, but it turns out it's House of
This will
Commons.
add to the temperature.
Just under a year ago, Theresa May was making her way back from Buckingham Palace, having been asked by the Queen to form a government. Yeah, just a year. To say it's been a tumultuous 12 months would be an understatement. Here's a reminder of the highs and the lows.
I have just been to Buckingham Palace, where Her Majesty the Queen has asked me to form a new government, and I accepted. If you're just managing, I want to address you directly. Remind him of anybody? When future generations look back at this time, they will judge us not only by the decision that we made, but by what we made of that decision. I have just chaired a meeting of the Cabinet where we agreed that the government should call a general election to be held on the 8th of June. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. That the Conservative Party has won the most seats and probably the most votes, then it will be incumbent on us to ensure that we have that period of stability, and that is exactly what we will do.
So, 12 months in the life of Theresa May and the rest of us too. I mean, I'm exhausted. I don't know what she feels like. How weak or strong is her position? And this constant reporting, more in the Sunday papers today, about groups of Tory MPs manoeuvring to bring her down in the autumn, before the autumn, after the autumn, name a month between now and the end of the year. Is that's got to be kind of corrosive as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every single week there's going to be another story. But the reality is, the stronger Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party look in the polls, the stronger her position is, just because it's, look, what are the alternatives? You know, if it's Theresa May. But again, it's depending really on the polls, whether it's Theresa May herself who is helping to cause that boost for Jeremy Corbyn, if she is the toxic part of the Tory party brand, and if they get rid of her, then the Tories would spring back up and the Labour Party would go down. Or, you know, is it best, you know, for her to just soak it all, literally just draw out all the toxins, draw it all up, and then, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, she stands down, and then the next leader takes over, whoever they are, next generation, or say David Davis, and then they sort of start again, start afresh, start anew, and she takes all the badness, the toxins with her. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, there must be a hell of a lot of very detailed polling going on right now to try and find that out. I don't know the answer.
Can she relaunch herself?
No, she can't. She's going to make a big speech on Tuesday.
Right.
Extracts which are being briefed into tomorrow morning's papers. I've seen them, and without
What's
breaking...
the subject matter?
Me. As in, not me, but her.
Oh, I see.
That would be a really weird speech.
There has been enough movement from BBC political programmes into number 10. It's going to be her. It's going to be the relaunch. It's going to be, you know, I have a purpose. I'm still here, and effectively allow me to stay. But the problem is, I think Julie's absolutely right. There is a feeling among Tory MPs that it would be ideal for her to last at least 2 years, suck in all the bad blood of all the mistakes of Brexit, and to have a referendum or not, and the miscalculations, and then bring in a new person completely untarnished. The problem with that is events, dear boy, as someone famously once said. Brexit may go well, it may not go so well. Talks may produce something, or she may get stuck down a very big hole. And at the moment, she's the elastoplast over the two sides of the Tory party, the Remain and the Leave side. And she's there because they want her to be, and that plaster is still holding. If that seismic Great Divide goes any further, the plaster breaks, she'll go straight down the hole with it.
David Davis has said he doesn't want a leadership election, that he thinks Mrs May should continue. The papers this morning are full of briefings from what are claimed to be David Davis's people saying that she faces, quote, abject misery, it's time that she will have to go sooner rather than later. They clearly haven't got the memo from Double D, as he's called.
No, and of course publicly they've all got to declare loyalty until the moment when they feel the time has come to be disloyal. The problem she's got is that context determines 95% of how a leader is perceived. She can make a brilliant speech this week about how she plans to be bold and all the rest of it. But the context is that lost majority in the election, a hung parliament with Brexit looming.
Which makes it hard to be bold as well, whatever you say.
Yeah,
hung parliaments are not bold.
You can't be. You will have to manoeuvre all the time, and it will be exhausting and transparent in the scheming, like with the arrangement with the DUP, like some of the votes that have already happened. And it will be utterly draining. Now, Judy is right. The key question for the Tories will be, if they get someone else in, does that transform their prospects? And while that's not clear, I agree, she will probably cling on. But there will be no glorious summer for her again. The pre-election context was fantastic for her. It's really dark now and tough.
Because the key thing is what you said, and who would have thunk it? Yeah. You've just said the Tories are frightened to provoke us another election because they think Jeremy Corbyn will win. Yeah. Who thought we would ever get into that position?
But in that same argument, who thought that Theresa May would win the Tory leadership and would be so popular in those ridiculous points? Who thought Jeremy Corbyn would be Labour leader? Who thought he would ever get that close? Who thought he'd be where he is now? That actually does show that there is still hope for, well, maybe not Theresa May. I think that she is hulled below the waterline. But actually, what goes up can also come down. But I have to say, in Theresa May's defence, and I don't think she'll last very long, and I think she's been exposed during the election campaign for just simply not having enough of the depth, not having enough of the fight. But to be fair to her, she must have a backbone of steel, because I think a lesser man or woman would have just gone, oh, I'm off now. I'm fed it. She is standing firm, and to take the flack that she is getting, she is as steely as they come.
It's almost a form of penance she's doing at the moment, isn't it? That having brought her party to this less than glorious position, she's having to try and kind of restore things a bit, knowing in her heart of hearts, and perhaps even not as deep as that, that she will not be the beneficiary.
No, absolutely not. And that's exactly, remember what she said to the 1922 committee that Monday after the general election: I got us into this mess, I'm going to get it out of it. And, Tories want her to do this. Talking to MPs this week and the last few weeks, actually, it's quite interesting. There is now a pretty hard feeling settling that the new person, guy or girl, should come from the 2010 intake, or possibly...
skip a generation.
Skip a generation. The feeling is...
Bye-bye Boris.
Borises, the Didis, the Theresas, the Hammonds.
Bye-bye Amber Rudd.
No, she's 2010.
She was 2010.
But she's got tiny majorities.
So was Amber Rudd saying this to you?
So, no, but there was one MP, one minister in your foyer a mere hour ago.
Oh, no. Did we have a foyer?
You have a foyer. Wow. Not much longer. But I think there are about 30 of them from the 2010 intake alone. All of them, believe it or not, fancy their chances. And for any of those to expose themselves and to lay out their agenda, they're going to need 2 years to make these sorts of speeches.
Let's turn to Labour, because earlier we talked to Caroline Flint, the Labour MP, about the threat to deselect what are called moderate Labour MPs. Here's what Shadow Minister and Corbyn ally Chris Williamson told ITV earlier this week.
MPs need to reflect the political programme that is overwhelmingly supported by Labour members and Labour supporters. And if people aren't prepared to do that, then it will be up to members in their local constituencies to find someone else who will.
How big a change is Labour now going to undergo? To what extent will Labour now be recast in the mould of Mr Corbyn and his wing of the party?
Well, in policy terms, it already has been largely recast into the Corbyn-MacDonald view, although with lots of examples of them being pretty expedient. Trident being an example, where they went into the election backing retention, even though personally they're totally committed to unilateral nuclear disarmament.
And they might now be able to move to that position.
Well, they might, but that example of expediency leads me to make this prediction. Maybe I'll be wrong. I suspect Corbyn and McDonnell will be sitting there thinking, we are close to power. Do we really want 18 months of civil war, which is what deselection battles would become?
And bad publicity.
And terrible publicity, and an implosion in a party on the verge, possibly, of an election win. And my guess is that they won't, and they will go out of their way to try and stop it. John McDonnell has said many times divided parties lose elections, and I don't think they will want this. Now, there are always power battles in parties. We've just been talking about it in the Tory party. And there will be moments of heightened tension between the Labour MPs and their memberships, but I don't think that this is going to happen.
If Steve is right, we should be looking for signs of Mr. Corbyn and Mr. McDonnell trying to hose things down.
Yeah,
I don't see them.
That. No, we're not
yet,
hearing from
anyway.
the Grim Reaper there as well. I mean, you know, although I agree with you, I don't think they need to do this. The moderate wing of the party, the Blairite, Brownouts, whatever you want to call them, they're not standing up to Jeremy Corbyn anymore. They're just trying to get a few select committee chairmanships, keep their powder dry and just survive and hope something happens. Yeah, I mean, the extraordinary thing is, though, I mean, again, it's given that no one expected Jeremy Corbyn, no one tried to deselect him, and no one insisted that he apologised for his disloyalty for those 400+ votes against the whip when he wasn't Labour leader. I find it extraordinary. We are in Soviet-style show trial, you know, repentant territory. This is very,
we haven't had a show trial yet.
Matter of time. That's
absolutely right, apart from Brexit. So the Labour Party are united until it comes to voting in the House of Commons on what to do about Europe.
Well, I'm happy to keep Jeremy
49. So if Brexit goes well, that 49 will wither away a bit and start getting part of the measure. If Brexit goes badly, you know, the Vince Cables of this world jump up and saying, you know, we need a new referendum, we need to stop all this. Huge temptation then amongst Labour MPs and the entire movement to recalibrate and argue for maybe staying and having a second remnant, and that will split the party right down the middle.
But Steve, the significance of Brexit in this is, and you heard Owen Paterson say it earlier in the show, that 85% of people voted for parties that wanted Brexit, meaning Labour and Conservative. And it's true that Mr. Corbyn and Mr. McDonnell are actually more Eurosceptic than people realise. However, they also want another election quite quickly because they don't know how this may be as good as it gets. They just don't know. None of us know. So get an election quick because we think we might win it. That means that they could well play games. Why would they just bolster the Tories if a big defeat on Brexit could well provoke another election?
Again, I'm guessing, but I think they will play games. And if there's a chance of undermining this government perhaps fatally to get this early election, which would be massively in their interest. They're ahead in the polls.
Yes.
I think they will do it. And they have displayed expediency on Europe in the past, possibly arguing for it whilst having doubts about it in the referendum, for Remain, sorry. So, yeah, I think there will be, as I said earlier, I think in this Parliament there are going to be moments where it looks as if the government could be defeated, and I think they will move towards defeating the government.
Any Remainer who is worried about the economic effects of Brexit should be rather more worried about the economic effects of a Corbyn-led hard left government.
Well, on that,
be careful what you wish for.
On that controversial point, we better leave it there.